Hello and good evening, I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Zara Qairina Mahathir's death in Sabah in July has turned the spotlight on bullying in schools, exposing not just the violence itself, but the slow and inadequate institutional response. Now, as public anger grows, calls for reform are intensifying, from an anti-bullying act being proposed to school-based interventions being called for. Now, tonight on the show, we'll ask what Malaysia must do to make schools safe spaces again, and what lessons Zara's case leaves us as a nation. Joining me on the show today is Dr Farah Nini Dusuki, who is the Child Commissioner to SUHAKAM, the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. Dr Farah, it's good of you to join us on the show. It's good to have you back. Zara's death, of course, has really shaken the country, raised a lot of alarm bells about how widespread bullying has become in our schools. Now, from your perspective as Children's Commissioner, what has Zara's case revealed to you about how bullying cases are addressed and handled in Malaysia?
Okay, thank you very much, Melisa. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Clearly, Zara's case has shown how, to put it very bluntly, bullying cases are being handled poorly and with least focus on the best interests of children. Why do I say that? Is because when a case happens as severe as what happened to Zara, I think there were signs before that were overlooked. I mean, in a good system, whenever whenever there's a case like this, surely there have been signals before, or attempts to complain, or maybe even daring not to complain, so many factors involved all at the same time. But then again, it just goes to show that despite, the case of Zara took place, I think exactly about a month ago, within the same week, there were at least 3 cases of a horrendous nature, so much so that my office has issued a media statement highlighting on the issue. It goes to show that it is so rampant, and despite the publicity around Zara's case, it seems that between Zara's case and now, there's been about 10 cases, with 6 involving very severe injuries. Right. So it is certainly alarming.
Could you maybe elaborate a little bit about some of the cases that SUHAKAM has received, bullying cases specifically? Were there any patterns that you noticed?
All right. I mean, the ones that SUHAKAM has received, fortunately or unfortunately, they are not the most severe of its kind, in the sense that I suppose people who come to us know that we do not have intervention powers, we don't have enforcement authority. So, but what they want us to do is to at least look into it, and help them to get some form of remedy. So, for example, in past 3 years, almost 3 years since I've become commissioner, we have received a total of 10 cases, 9 cases involving peer-to-peer violence, peer-to-peer bullying, whereas one of those 10 involves teacher and student. Yes, so
yeah, that's really concerning, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, talk to me about that, about the differences in the dynamics between peer-to-peer and teacher bullying.
Now, when we look at violence in school, of course, there are different dynamics between peer-to-peer and also teacher to students, and of course, it's worrying, because when it happens between teacher and students, it goes to show that not good examples have been shown to the students, isn't it? Not. In fact, the one case that we received is especially, to me, it's pretty alarming, because it's a case whereby the teacher suspected the student was wearing makeup to school when she was using sunscreen, and her face was actually rubbed so hard that, she got injured in front of the whole classroom. You see, so there's multi-level of bullying, isn't it? I mean, and the poor girl is traumatized, not just by the physical act, but also the shame, that has taken place in front of all the rest of her peers. So with behavior like that, I mean, are we really shocked that children are violent?
Can I ask you, Dr. Farah, in the cases of peer-to-peer, which seem to be the majority of cases that SUHAKAM has received at least, how do we think about that? I mean, what procedures should there be in place to ensure that bullying is addressed? I'm also wondering, because holding bullies accountable means also we need to recognize that they too are children in need of guidance and maybe rehabilitation. How do we strike that balance?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it is not an easy balance to strike, but you are absolutely right. We must remember that they are also children, and whether they are the aggressors or whether they are victims, both should be treated as children first and foremost. Now, when they are victims, the reason why I feel that it has become so rampant is because schools no longer is a safe haven for children, and because of that, all the more necessary to have a good complaint mechanism where children feel safe, to inform of any incidents of bullying. But we all know that this is not the case, because many a times, children come and tell us that when they complain, it just gets worse. It doesn't get better, it gets worse, to the extent that they have to change schools. You see, so definitely what we need is a safe portal, a complaint mechanism whereby children can actually address their their grievances freely without any fear. And you talk about, and you ask me about what if where they are the aggressors. Well, first and foremost, I'm not in favor of taking punitive actions against them, especially when it's first time. Definitely a strong message has to be sent that bullying is unacceptable, but at the same time, you do not want to address this group of children in a fully punitive manner, because they have a long way to go. And if you involve the criminal justice system, stigmatization that come along with it has far-reaching consequences to these children. And when you talk about the child justice system, the focus has got to be reformation, rehabilitation, and reintegration into the society, because at the end of the day, it is to our benefit that these children reform, isn't it not? Other than, if they're treated in a punitive manner and we put them where they're not supposed to be, and they just learn worse tricks.
Okay. All right. So I have two questions in response to that, to follow up on that. The absence of a mechanism, or the Education Ministry says actually it has channels to report bullying. I think they have a Sekolahku Sejahtera portal. They have other web portals to do so anonymously. Do you think these measures are falling short? Where are the gaps to address that? And the other, regarding the punitive measures. So we have on the table being proposed currently the Anti-Bullying Act. So a specific legislation, dedicated legislation to define and criminalize these different forms of bullying. Do you think we need such a law, or should we be focusing on strengthening enforcement under existing frameworks to avoid punitive measures?
I think we need to do both. On one hand, we need to enforce whatever we have now, because like it or not, this, as I've mentioned earlier, despite all the publicity that has been taking place, it is still happening at an alarming rate. So because of that, immediate action must be taken to address the issue. On the other hand, having an anti-bully legislation on its own, which is supposed to be a comprehensive in nature and all that, should be on the plate, but as a longer term, target. It should not, it cannot be just purely punitive, because you need to address the children who are involved in a more restorative manner. So because of that, a lot of work needs to go into that. You don't want to have something which is a knee-jerk reaction and only to face, different problems as a result of that. Yeah.
I want to ask you about the cultural dimension of some of the root causes of bullying. I think there are some people who argue that bullying thrives, particularly in Malaysia, because schools normalize hierarchies, right? You have the seniors, you have the juniors, you have the teachers, you have the students, and that this culture actually enables abuse of power. How much do you think that's true?
I think that is more relevant in boarding schools. This culture of seniority and juniors, because they learn, sleep and eat together, you see. But then I think when we look at bullying, we need to look at it holistically and not just at a residential level. So for that, there is a very good study that has taken place and published in 2021, which actually spoke to children in 4,469 schools, secondary schools in Malaysia, and they receive almost 90% respondents, and they've highlighted the causes of it. And they've literally said down 7, but I want to highlight what I think is so important, and that is social media. The research found that the more children are spending time on the social media, the higher the risk of bullying taking place, you know, both as perpetrator and also as victims, because it affects their mental health. Wow. So I think this is something that we want to highlight. I'll be more than happy to share the link to the, you know, to the study later on. But more importantly, that's one. And then also mental health. You see, children who are stressed, having anxieties, etc., they are too more prone towards bullying. And it goes without saying that school environment, a strong and positive bond between teachers and students actually can cut bullying into half. You see, so I think that of all the 7 points, these 3 points are particularly important and needs to be highlighted, because, you know, to think that the closer children and their teachers are, you can actually prevent bullying from taking place in the first place. And you talk about residential school. I think residential school needs extra surveillance and monitoring, because I too went to a boarding school for 5 years, and fortunately in all girls boarding school we never had, you know, not at least what we are hearing now. Because why? Our wardens and our teachers, although they were very, very strict, mind you, and all girls school, but they were loving and kind at the same time, you see, and they were very vigilant and monitored us very carefully. So we don't know what time they'll do the spot checks. It can be at 2 a.m., it can be at 1 a.m. And as long as you're out of bed when lights are closed, you know, well, be prepared to face the consequences. But you see now, the fact that Zara was actually seen at different times, according to the report, right, goes to show that where is the monitoring system? Where are the adults in this case who are supposed to be there to protect the children? Yes, so surveillance and monitoring has to be heightened in the current rampancy of bullying taking place.
Dr. Farah, thank you so much for sharing some of those really important points with us on the show. I appreciate your time. Dr. Farah Nini Dusuki, Children's Commissioner to SUHAKAM. There, we're going to take a quick break and consider this. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our discussion about bullying in schools. This in light of Zara Qairina Mahathir's death in Sabah in July. Now, Zara Qairina's story has resonated across Malaysia because it reveals not just the cruelty of bullying, but the culture of silence and inaction that allows for it to persist. Now, from teachers to parents to policymakers to students, the nation is now asking, how did we get here and how do we change course? So joining me on the show to discuss this further is Ang Shu Yi, who is the founder of Impian Kencana, which is a non-profit that works with teens from underserved communities to help them build resilience and character and essential life skills, all of which are critical to navigate challenges like bullying and peer pressure. So she's also an alumna of Teach For Malaysia with a perspective of what happens in classrooms in Malaysia. So Shu Yi, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. I appreciate you taking time to talk to us. You have worked closely with teens from vulnerable backgrounds. And when it comes to bullying, I'm curious to know what you're seeing. What is it that you're seeing most often on the ground?
The case that I see most often is actually verbal and social bullying, like name calling, exclusion, gossips. A lot of them actually look like less serious, or parents or adults would dismiss as kids just being kids rather than physical bullying. So it actually, but what I see is actually really eats away the child's confidence. Sometimes they would, as time passed, they would actually really believe in those cruel words, and it really affect their self-belief. And if you ask me, from what I have interacted with the kids, they feel anxious having to socialize with others, and they become withdrawal, like they want to stop interacting with these kids who are mean to them, and that would indirectly affect their attendance in school. And very likely, you know, they will tell their parents that I don't want to go to school, and that's it. Like they might drop out of school.
Oh dear, that's really worrying to hear that this could affect their long-term trajectory in terms of education. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you have observed? Now, I want to look at it from different perspectives and talk about the bullies' experience. Bullies are often struggling children themselves, and I am curious to know what you have observed. What do you think are some of the root causes or common root causes of bullying?
Yeah. So in my teaching years as a Teach For Malaysia fellow in 2017-2018, I was teaching a school in Pasir Gudang, and I was working with kids from very challenging background. And during my house visit, I found out that a lot of these kids who are labeled as bullies, they all had a history of pain. They come from families of trauma. A lot of them are often neglected at home. So yeah, whenever I talk about bullies, this boy came to my mind. He was 14 years old when I met him, and he was labeled as the biggest bullies in my school. When I visited his house, I found out that he was blamed for his father's death because they were quarreling right before his father's got a heart attack. And the elder brother was very abusive towards him. The mom and the elder sister treated him as an outcast. So I couldn't imagine what was the life that he was living in before he turned himself like to become a monster. Yeah, so that was him. Another girl I met when she was 15, she was the taika chair in school. Everyone was afraid of her. She was pulling girls' hair, you know, like she would punch people, you know, like as a girl. But when I visited her house, she was staying with the grandmother at the time. I found out that both her parents were in prison, and she grew up being passed from one relative to another. So if you ask me what's the common cause of bullying, if you are an educator, you would know that there's a Maslow hierarchy of needs. I think that basic needs are not met. The needs for love, attention, care, belonging. Yeah, so because they are hurt themselves, so they hurt others.
Yeah. So how, because so much of bullying is shaped by what children see at home, by what they see in their communities, can schools then realistically respond to that? Is that something that schools can be able, will be able to respond to if so much of what how bullying is shaped is beyond the classroom?
Realistically, I do not think so. I think it is unfair to expect school to fix everything, but school can be the place where interventions can happen. So it took me a while before the two bullies opened up to me and agreed to me that they will stop causing harm to the others. However, that took quite some effort and time from the teacher. Yeah, so teachers can notice early warnings or signs and create a safe space for these kids to open up, or a safe reporting system so that bystanders feel that they won't be attacked by these bullies. Like, how do we create a safe reporting system for observers, and how do we model empathy? A lot of the time when the bullies understand that they are causing harm to others, they are agreeable to stop doing it. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so school cannot change home, but they can give children a different experience of what respect and kindness can look like.
Yeah. You mentioned bystanders, the culture, the active bystander culture. Talk to me a little bit about what students themselves can do, or the role that they can play in creating safer school cultures. have you, because of your work with Impian Kencana, you've talked to teens from vulnerable backgrounds, what has worked best in your experience about what it takes to build this culture, this courage, I must also say, of empathy and ability to speak out when they see bullying take place?
Yeah, one thing that really worked in our workshop is role play. So what's better than teaching them the action than getting them to experience the holding themselves, getting them to play victim, play bullies. So in the classroom, very common, every day when we meet the students, they would name call their friends. And when we caught it, we would immediately stop the session and ask them, how do you feel? Okay, you don't feel good. Why do you do it to others? And then they would say, they are being caught that as well. And we try to help them see that even though this is the norms, but this is not the right way. Yeah, so I would say role play, like empathy workshops, getting them to really understand the impact of their actions or words, even though they do not have the intent. Separating the intent and the impact and helping them to understand that your norms doesn't have to be you. You define who you are, who you want to be, and you do not have to follow what's around you. And because when that happened, we will tell them, all of you who are witnessing this, you did not stand up for this. Why? Why do you allow this to happen? Why do you allow this to be your culture? So we try to help them understand that it's not right to stay silent either, because when you allow this to happen, meaning you actually allow this to be your culture, you think that this is normal, but it's not. You actually don't like this from happening. How can you speak up for the right thing? So this is what we always remind them every lesson. So with this new PPR that we are in, it's been 6-7 workshops. Until now, we are still reminding them of the same thing, like the way you talk to each other, the way you interact, how to be respectful, how to not name call each other. Yeah.
Do you think it's working? Have you seen these types of interventions work in helping them change their mind, their mindset, their behavior?
Yeah, so Impian Kencana has been running for 5th year now. So this is the fifth community that we went into. Previously, we were in another PPR in Shah Alam. So we were there for like 3 years. And towards the end of the 3rd year, the students have changed so much. Even the parents, actually, it was the testimony actually came from the parents and the teachers. So one of the parents actually called me last year or early this year, asking me or thanking me that we have the program at the PPR because the kids managed to get into MRSM, and the children, the boy himself were leading the team in workshop and were getting the students to present. And when the teacher asked him, where do you learn all of this from? And the students mentioned Impian Kencana. So I think it takes a longer term intervention before kids can change their mindset, but I think it's definitely doable.
That's wonderful, building the foundations of this. You've created a little community leader in his own right, in his little environment as well. And I'm glad you talked about the long-term interventions. And I want to talk about the harsher interventions, because there's a lot of focus now on whether or not Malaysia should introduce an anti-bullying act. So specific legislation that defines and punishes bullying. From your ground level experience, I'm just wondering how you see this. Do you think that legislation can meaningfully change what happens in schools? Or do we go the approach of Impian Kencana, for instance, the softer skills approach, the building resilience and empathy approach, changing culture?
Legislation can send an important message that bullying is not trivial. It's a serious issue. But in my opinion, I think laws alone cannot change the culture. Bullying is a culture. How do we change this culture of bullying? If we rely only on punishment, we risk creating fear but not change. Yeah, what we need is both strong policy to protect the victims and cultural change to make sure that kindness is the norm. Yeah. So yes, an act can be a step forward, but it must be paired with rehab for the bullies, support for the victims, and an education for everyone.
Can I just ask you for your takeaway message? I mean, Shu Yi, if you were to give a message to students and parents and educators alike about what they can do to prevent and also to respond to bullying, what message would you like to leave them with to break the cycle of bullying, the culture of bullying?
To parents and teachers, I think it's important to dismiss bullying as kids being kids, because the scars can last a lifetime. And to young people, speak up, stand up for each other, and remember that every bully has a story and every victim has the right to feel safe.
Shu Yi, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. I appreciate your time. Ang Shu Yi, the founder of Impian Kencana, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.